Langston Tate, 65 years old, retired and well-respected, beloved by his neighbors, vanished without trace. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. Just silence. His phone was missing. His car had disappeared. His safe stood wide open, and his dog was left starving. It was as if Langston had walked out the front door and never looked back. But here's the chilling truth. Langston didn't walk out. Someone erased him, and whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. Langston Tate was not a man who simply vanished. He was steady, dependable, even predictable. He cherished his routines, especially the morning coffee ritual with Miss Irene, the neighbor who lived directly across the street in their quiet Atlanta neighborhood. For nearly 8 years, come rain or shine, birthdays or holidays, they met every morning at 7 a.m. on Langston's front porch. Even when Langston was sick with the flu, he still made it out in his robe just to keep the ritual alive. But on this particular Wednesday morning, Langston was nowhere to be found. At first, Miss Irene assumed he had simply had a rough night. Perhaps he overslept or his blood pressure was acting up again. But by 8 a.m., a creeping worry settled in her chest. And by 9 a.m., that worry turned to dread. She crossed the street and knocked on Langston's door. No answer. She called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Peering through the windows, she saw the blinds drawn tight. Inside, everything looked normal, yet the silence was deafening. It was then she made the call to 911. 2 patrol officers arrived just before noon. From the outside, Langston's house looked untouched. No broken windows, no kicked-in doors. The lawn was neatly manicured, the walkway swept clean. Just another quiet home on a quiet street. But inside, the officers felt something was terribly wrong. The front door was locked from the inside, but Miss Irene had a key for emergencies, so they let themselves in. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No evidence of a struggle. But subtle details sent chills down their spines. Langston's dog, Peanut, was curled up in the hallway, clearly distressed. Her food bowl was empty. Her water bowl dry. She hadn't been fed for at least a day or two. Then, more unsettling discoveries followed. The safe in the upstairs closet, installed by Langston after his retirement, stood open and empty. His jewelry drawer was also cleaned out. Gone were the heirlooms Langston treasured. A gold watch passed down from his father, a silver chain he wore to church, and a diamond ring he once mentioned quietly as something he planned to leave behind for someone special. His wallet was missing from its usual place near the door. His phone was gone, his car was gone, but his keys still lay on the kitchen counter. Suddenly, the story shifted. This was no case of an elderly man wandering off. This was something far darker. Detectives were called in that very afternoon. An initial sweep revealed no foreign fingerprints, no blood, no drag marks. Surveillance footage was blank. Neighbors hadn't seen anyone enter or leave the property. And yet, Langston Tate was gone. Detective Alvarez, a homicide specialist with 12 years of experience, stood quietly in the middle of Langston's bedroom, her eyes scanning the room. "This isn't just a disappearance," she murmured. "This is a calculated erasure. Whoever did this didn't break in. They were invited." That unsettling thought hung heavy in the air as Miss Irene, now sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, finally spoke up. Her voice was soft, almost reluctant. "He had a husband," she said quietly, "from Jamaica, but he's been traveling a lot lately." Detective Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "When did you last see him?" Miss Irene looked away, gazing off into the distance. "About 2 weeks ago. Langston said he went down there to take care of something, but I don't know. He'd been quiet lately. Real quiet." The puzzle pieces began to shift. If this was a robbery, it was deeply personal. If this was a disappearance, it had been meticulously planned. If this was murder, it was intimate. Langston Tate hadn't been taken by a stranger. He had been taken by someone who knew exactly where the safe was, what was inside it, and how to walk out the door without leaving a single mark. This is the story of a man who gave his heart to a stranger and paid for it with his life. But this disappearance was only the beginning. The lies run deeper. The betrayal cuts sharper. And the truth? It's darker than anyone imagined. So if you're ready to follow every twist, every secret, and every chilling discovery, don't just watch. Subscribe, because we're just getting started. 13 years before Langston Tate vanished, he wasn't searching for love. But love found him anyway, or so he thought. Langston was 52 when he met Omar Bell. It was a rare vacation, a 5-day getaway to Miami Beach meant to clear his head and shake the weight of another lonely year. Recently retired from financial planning, he had traded his suits and ties for linen shirts and sandals, hoping to find something close to peace. Instead, he felt invisible until Omar. Omar was 29, tall and smooth, with a Jamaican accent as sweet as honey drizzled over warm rum. He worked behind the bar at Langston's Hotel, a beachside resort that sold watered-down cocktails and dreams with a view. Omar had mastered both. He noticed Langston. That alone was enough to spark something new. The first night, Langston ordered a mojito. Omar made it strong. The second night, Omar called him by name. By the third night, after hours, they were sitting across from each other, talking about music, childhoods, food, and family. Omar asked questions like he genuinely cared. He listened like Langston mattered. For the first time in years, Langston felt wanted. "I never thought someone like you would look at someone like me," Langston told Omar that night. Omar just smiled. "You're exactly what I've been looking for." It was a line, maybe even a well-practiced one. But Langston didn't care. It felt good. It felt real. They exchanged numbers before Langston flew back to Atlanta. The texts began the next day, then calls, then long FaceTime nights with Omar sitting outside on a break, telling Langston how much he missed him. Within 3 months, Omar flew to Atlanta just to see him. And he never left. Langston, smitten and maybe a little stunned, helped Omar find an apartment at first. But the truth was, Omar was over every night. He cooked, cleaned, and rubbed Langston's back after long walks. He even bonded with Peanut, Langston's dog, who never warmed up to anyone. 6 months in, Omar moved in. A year after they met, they got married in a small ceremony at the Fulton County Courthouse. Omar's family wasn't there. Just a few friends from work and Miss Irene standing in for Langston's sister, who couldn't make it. It was simple, quiet, but Langston looked happier than anyone had seen him in years. He believed he'd finally found forever. But not everything added up. There was one detail, a small, stubborn thread that never quite unraveled. Omar never introduced Langston to his family. At first, Langston didn't push. Maybe they were estranged. Maybe they disapproved. He knew how those conversations could go, especially in Caribbean households. So, he gave Omar the space he seemed to need. Yet, every year like clockwork, Omar made the same trip. A month, sometimes 2, back to Jamaica to visit his sick aunt. Always the same reason, always the same woman. An Aunt Langston never spoke to, never met, never even video called. Once, Langston asked to go with him. Omar smiled and kissed his forehead gently. "Baby, it's not a vacation. I'm going to take care of her. You'd be miserable." Langston didn't argue. He didn't want to come across as insecure. Omar always returned with gifts, spices, hand-woven baskets, photos of sunsets, and bustling markets. He brought back stories, laughter, and love. So Langston let it be. For 13 years, he let it go. Between those trips, life looked good on the surface. They hosted dinner parties, attended church together, and traveled occasionally. Langston paid the bills. Omar kept the house warm. To outsiders, they were the perfect couple. But inside, cracks were forming. Omar never spoke much about his past. He never shared family photos or posted about Langston on social media. "I don't like putting our business online," he'd say. Sometimes, Langston would wake up in the middle of the night and find Omar downstairs, whispering on the phone in patois, his voice low, his tone sharp. Omar always claimed it was a cousin or a friend going through something. Whenever Langston pressed with too many questions, Omar would deflect with a kiss, a joke, or a distraction that almost always ended in the bedroom. Langston never pushed harder because he wanted to believe. He wanted their love to be real. After a lifetime of being overlooked, brushed off, or chosen last, having someone truly choose you feels like rescue. But not every rescue leads to safety. Sometimes it pulls you deeper into the storm. Love blinds us to what we don't want to see and makes us ignore what we fear to face. By the 5th year of their marriage, the whispers had started, but not from Langston. They came from his friends, those who had known him longest, who had seen him through breakups, disappointments, and long stretches of loneliness. People who cared enough to say something, even when they knew Langston didn't want to hear it. It always began gently. "Hey, Lang, when's Omar going to let you visit Jamaica? Don't you think it's strange? You've been married so long, yet still no family introductions? Why is he always calling from block numbers when he travels?" Langston would smile and brush it off. He had the answers Omar gave him. His family was old school. They wouldn't understand us, our relationship. That explanation seemed to satisfy only Langston. His friends exchanged worried glances, whispering behind his back, not to gossip, but out of genuine concern. Langston's best friend, Fred, once tried to push the issue. "Man, I'm just saying, if the roles were reversed and you were flying off every year without explanation, never inviting him, never showing your people pictures of him, would he be okay with that?" Langston had paused. He'd even nodded. But love is tricky. It smooths over rough edges of doubt and paints cracks with hope. Langston had spent so many years alone, so many nights praying just to be seen, that when someone finally saw him, he chose to believe. He told himself Omar was telling the truth, that love just looked different for everyone, that families were complicated. Still, Langston held on because for every red flag, Omar had a smile, a warm touch, a way of pulling Langston back into the dream. Then came the money. It started small. One day, Omar came home buzzing with excitement. "Babe, I've been thinking we should open a juice bar. One of those organic spots, the kind all the new folks moving into the city love. It'll be ours." Langston hesitated. Omar didn't. He kissed Langston's forehead and said, "You always said you wanted to build something with me. This is it." That was the first deposit. Langston dipped into his retirement savings, just a little at first, enough to cover the lease on a storefront, a few permits, some equipment. But the juice bar never really took off. Delays, construction issues, permits lost in the system. Omar always had a reason. 6 months later, Omar had another idea, a food truck. Something mobile, less overhead, he said, bigger margins. We could take it to festivals, parks, everywhere. Langston co-signed a small business loan in Omar's name, but the truck never arrived. Whenever Langston asked for updates, Omar pivoted. "I'm working on it. These things take time. You said you believed in me." And Langston did, or at least he wanted to. He told himself it wasn't about the money. It was about investing in their future, building something together. He remembered watching couples on HGTV flip houses, start farms, open restaurants. Why couldn't that be them? But as the years passed, the money kept trickling out. The businesses never materialized. Langston didn't realize how much he'd spent until it was mostly gone. His savings, his emergency fund, even a portion of his pension. One day, he logged into his retirement account and stared at the balance. That IT wasn't zero, but it was close enough to hurt. Peanut, his dog, nuzzled his knee, sensing something was wrong. Still, he didn't confront Omar. Not really. He merely suggested they slow down on investments. Maybe focus on saving again. Maybe try something small they could manage together. Omar stared at him, hurt, disappointed, even a little angry. "I thought you believed in me." That one sentence shattered everything. Langston folded. He apologized, said he was just stressed, told Omar it wasn't about trust, it was about timing. And just like that, the conversation ended. It only takes one moment to shatter an illusion. One glimpse to see everything for what it really is. Omar had just returned from Jamaica. It was his usual yearly trip. The same vague explanation, the same excuses. This time, it was a funeral. An uncle, or maybe a cousin. Langston had lost track. He stopped asking. But when Omar came back, he wasn't alone. "This is Nain," Omar said, rolling her suitcase through the door. "She's my cousin. First time in the States. She'll be staying with us for a little while." Langston smiled politely, nodded, and extended a hand. Nain was soft-spoken, maybe 30, neatly dressed, well-mannered, and unusually quiet. She thanked Langston for his hospitality. Her eyes never lingered, but they saw everything. From the start, something about her felt off. She watched too closely, listened too intently. She seemed more like an investigator than a guest. And she never called Omar cousin. Not once. Langston noticed, but said nothing. He wanted to be gracious. Wanted to believe there was still room in his heart for kindness. Even after everything Omar had chipped away. The days went on. Nain settled in quickly, almost too comfortably. She helped cook, cleaned without being asked, stayed out of the way, yet was always present. She hovered just enough to be noticed, never quite blending in. Omar beamed when she was around, pride shining through his every smile. He laughed more often, recounted old stories from Jamaica, some that Langston had never heard before. Stories carefully crafted to omit any mention of Langston or the life they shared. One evening, after dinner, Langston was washing dishes in the kitchen when he overheard them speaking in the living room. In patois, quick, sharp, and low. The tone wasn't affectionate. It was tense, urgent. The words were unclear, but the rhythm spoke volumes. They weren't reminiscing, they were planning. Still, Langston said nothing. Silence had become his refuge. Confrontation was something he'd avoided for years, because the truth, whatever it was, terrified him more than the lie he lived with. Then came that night. Langston had gone to bed early. His body was exhausted, but his heart even more so. He lay staring at the ceiling, trying to drown out the noise of his own doubts. Around 2 a.m., he woke, dry mouth, thirsty. Quietly, so as not to wake Omar, he slipped from the bedroom. The house was dark, the air heavy. Barefoot, he padded across the cool floor, turned the corner toward the kitchen, and stopped. The guest room door was ajar, just enough to peer inside. There, under the soft glow of a nightstand lamp, Omar and Nain lay in bed together. Omar's back was bare, his arm draped over her. Nain's head was tucked against his chest, her hand resting lightly on his stomach. They were asleep, peaceful, close, intimate in a way no cousin ever should be. Langston didn't breathe, didn't blink. Frozen, he gripped the edge of the wall to steady himself. For a moment, the world tilted, not with rage or shock, but with clarity. And in that clarity, something inside him broke quietly, like glass cracking from within. No shatter, no sound, just a deep, irreversible split. He turned away, walked to the kitchen, and drank a glass of water slowly, deliberately, as if giving himself time to absorb the weight of what he'd just seen. The next morning, Nain made breakfast as if nothing had happened. Omar hummed in the shower. Life went on, at least for them. But for Langston, the illusion was gone. 13 years of trust shattered wide open. He saw every lie now, stretching back years. The missing money, secret trips, late-night calls, unexplained photos, empty promises. It all led here. A betrayal so intimate, so casually cruel, it didn't even try to hide itself. The worst part? Deep down, somewhere in the silence parts of himself, Langston hadn't known. He just didn't want it to be true. But now he had seen it with his own eyes. And no one else was seeing it. He needed answers, not one more lie. So he hired someone. A private investigator, quiet, discreet, paid in cash. Langston gave her a name, a photo, and one simple request. Tell me who he really is. A week later, she called back. Her voice was calm. Her words were not. Langston, he's not who he says he is. Langston sat down. His real name wasn't Omar Bell, it was Delano Ellis. He had a legal record in Jamaica. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, all under different aliases. And Nain? She wasn't his cousin. She was his wife. They had 2 children together, a boy and a girl, living in a small coastal town near Montego Bay. The same town Delano visited every year. The same one he said was home to a sick aunt. There was no aunt. There was only family, photos, marriage certificates, birth records, social media accounts. A whole second life, fully documented. Langston sat with the folder open on his lap, staring at the stark truth laid out in black and white. 13 years. 13 years of lies, of smiles hiding deceit, of sharing a bed with a man who was stealing from his bank account while raising another family on a distant island, with a woman he claimed was just a cousin. This was no ordinary betrayal. It was a calculated scam. Langston had been targeted. Everything, the charm, the attention, the whirlwind romance, had been part of a carefully crafted setup. Delano had studied him, won him over, married him under false pretenses, and siphoned off his savings for over a decade. This wasn't love. This was theft. Langston felt sick, used, and ashamed. How had he fallen for it? The pain was heavy, but the anger burned sharper. With the evidence in his hands, he finally saw the shape of the truth. But he made one fatal mistake. He confronted Delano. He couldn't hold back. "I know everything," Langston said, voice steady but fierce. "Your real name is Delano Ellis. I know about your legal record in Jamaica. Fraud, forgery, identity theft." Delano stood still for a moment, eyes fixed on the folder of proof. His real name, his secret family, every lie stripped bare. Then, without warning, he moved fast. He lunged across the table and snatched Langston's phone before he could unlock it. "What are you doing?" Langston asked, startled. Delano didn't answer. Instead, he called out Nain. She appeared down the hallway, calm and focused, as if this moment had been rehearsed. Perhaps she had overheard the confrontation. In her hand was a gun. Langston froze. "Sit down," she ordered. Delano grabbed a chair and shoved it behind Langston. Slowly, Langston backed into it, eyes locked on the weapon. "Don't make this worse," Delano muttered. Nain kept the gun steady as Delano ripped duct tape from a roll. Within seconds, Langston's hands were bound, then his ankles, then his chest, strapped tight against the chair. They moved with practiced precision, as if they'd done this before. Langston's phone buzzed once on the counter, Miss Irene's name lighting up the screen. His last chance. He opened his mouth to shout, but Delano was already pressing tape over it. Just like that, Langston Tate, the man who had spent his life in control, who built his future brick by brick, was now tied to a chair in his own kitchen, staring into the cold faces of two people he once trusted. He knew, deep in his gut, this night wouldn't end with mercy. Delano placed his phone in front of Langston and unlocked it. "Bank login," he said coldly. Langston didn't move. Nain cocked the gun and pressed it lightly against his temple. He logged in. "Transfer it," Delano ordered. "Every last cent. Everything you've got." Tears streamed down Langston's face as he clicked through the steps. Retirement funds, savings, investment accounts. He even opened a drawer and handed over his checkbook, passwords, and last credit cards. They emptied everything, but they weren't finished. "The jewelry," Delano said. "Where is it?" Langston nodded toward the stairs, toward the back of the closet. Delano retrieved a box full of watches, rings, cufflinks, whatever precious items Langston had left. Then came the final act. Delano stood over him and stared down his face for a long, heavy moment, perhaps thinking about the years they shared, the dog, the dinners, the way Langston used to laugh in his sleep. But there was no hesitation, no mercy. Delano stepped back. Nain raised the gun. Langston's last thought wasn't about the money, the lies, or the betrayal. It was about how silent the house had become, and how cold the eyes of the man he once loved now were. One shot. Langston Tate was gone. They worked quickly, methodically. Delano dragged Langston's lifeless body into the garage, wrapped it tightly in a tarp, then opened the trunk of Langston's own car and shoved him inside. Meanwhile, Nain cleaned the floor meticulously, wiped down every handle, scrubbed all surfaces. No blood, no evidence, no signs of what had transpired. By sunrise, the house looked untouched. Curtains drawn, bed made, coffee pot rinsed. Just another quiet morning on a quiet street. Langston's car rolled away, silently down the block. Delano and Nain vanished without a trace. No trail, no clue, and for a while, no answers. Langston's phone shut off. His bank accounts were drained. His safe emptied. Only Peanut, his loyal dog, remained, curled up in the hallway, waiting for the man who never came home. By the next morning, Langston Tate was reported missing. Miss Irene, growing worried after Langston failed to show up for their usual morning coffee, called the police again. This time, officers took a closer look. Inside the house, signs of struggle were evident. A chair knocked over, the faint scent of bleach lingering in the air. Peanut, still hungry, still waiting. No Langston. His phone was off. His car was gone. But there was one thing they hadn't wiped clean: the money. Langston's bank had flagged a series of suspicious transfers overnight. Thousands moved out of retirement accounts. Credit cards maxed in mere hours. Purchases pinged just after 3 a.m. One of the cards had just been used at a hotel near the Atlanta airport. The police acted swiftly. By the time officers arrived at the hotel, the front desk was already uneasy. One of their guests, a man calling himself Omar Bell, had checked in with a woman paying in cash. But security footage revealed the real story. They weren't just guests. They were fleeing. The footage showed Delano, Omar, and Nain wheeling 2 large suitcases into the building just before dawn. One of them kept glancing nervously over their shoulder. In a hotel parking lot, officers spotted Langston's car. When they opened the trunk, the search ended. Langston was there, wrapped in a tarp, shot once through the chest, duct tape still binding his wrists. Left behind like garbage. The officers radioed for backup. Inside, they began securing the floors, locking exits. The plan was already in motion. They weren't going to escape through the front door. Not this time. At 2:07 p.m., just as Delano and Nain stepped onto the airport shuttle outside, a black SUV cut them off. Officers swarmed the vehicle. Delano bolted. He made it halfway across the sidewalk before officers tackled him to the ground. Nain screamed, cried, and collapsed onto the curb, yelling she didn't know what was happening, but it was over. In Delano's bag, police found fake passports, return tickets to Kingston, Jamaica, and bundles of cash. In Nain's purse, they discovered Langston's watch and wedding ring. They had planned their escape down to the hour, confident they were ahead. But the truth moved faster. By nightfall, both were in custody. The trial of Delano Ellis and Nain Ellis began 6 months after their arrest. On day 1, the courtroom was packed. The evidence was airtight. DNA from the duct tape matched both Delano and Nain. Surveillance footage placed them at the hotel where Langston's body was found. Bank records showed the money transfers, many made under duress, some within minutes of Langston's final moments alive. But the prosecution dug even deeper. They traced Delano's travel history and uncovered inconsistencies in his passport entries. He had lied for years about where he was going and who he was with. Then came the texts. Hundreds of messages exchanged between Delano and Nain over more than a decade. They weren't just cousins or lovers. They were partners in crime. Some of their texts were purely logistical: flights, money transfers, hotel bookings. Delano never took the stand. Nain tried to claim fear. She said she was manipulated, that Delano had orchestrated everything. She didn't know the extent of his cruelty. But the messages told a different story. So did the gun. The jury reached a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts: murder, fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. Delano Ellis and Nain Ellis were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No deals, no leniency, no second chances. This was more than a murder. It was the betrayal of a soul. Langston Tate believed in love. He believed in kindness, in giving people a chance. After years of feeling invisible, he thought he had found someone who truly saw him. But what he found was not love. It was a performance. A lie so detailed, so intimate, it felt real. It looked like safety. It sounded like forever. If Langston's story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. His voice matters. His life mattered. Let's make sure he's never forgotten. For more true crime stories revealing deception, betrayal, and justice, subscribe now. Because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should fear the most.